Well, the day has finally come. Just under 3 months after being appointed Arsenal women's interim manager, Renee Slegers has the keys to London Colney and, in fact, the Emirates Stadium. From academy player to head coach of Arsenal women, the news has finally been confirmed. Renee Slegers appointed Arsenal women manager on an 18-month contract through to the end of the 2025-2026 season. As we say, Slegers taking interim charge of Arsenal after Jonas Eidevall's resignation in October has not lost a game in the league or the Champions League since taking over from Eidevall. The second job in a row now in which she's taken over Eidevall. The last time she did it, she won two league titles for Rosengard. Maybe that's a good omen. Daisy Goodhand, I know for one, you're delighted with the news from a fan's perspective. I think anyone else but Renee, I think the fan base wouldn't have gone down particularly well. Arsenal, I think it's safe to say, have made the right choice.
Yeah, absolutely. And the longer that it's gone on, the more I think as fans and obviously even us as well, we've kind of really started to get a little bit nervous, a little bit scared about what's going to happen. I think obviously she's come into quite a difficult role. All the focus has kind of been on the team, performing. She's always made it about the results, and it kind of has taken away from what she's actually achieved, coming in to quite a difficult role, possibly one of the hardest, going into one of the top teams, in women's football and doing what she's done. It's actually gone under the radar, I think, and even rival fans now are probably looking at what she's done, thinking, how can she, build on this? Do we sort of need to be worried? And I've spoken to a few Chelsea fans who are also thinking, if she gets this job, it's going to be a bit of a it's going to be a difficult task for everybody else. But obviously, it's building on what she's built already, and yeah, super exciting to have her. And obviously, we can't complain. But I think she's more than deserved, and she's done a fantastic job under the circumstances.
I mean, I think the moment for me where it looks crazy if Arsenal were to go anywhere else was when she was awarded she was nominated for the November Manager of the Month, and then she actually won the December Manager of the Month, which is obviously voted for, by the fans and Arsenal. We know of Arsenal's online presence that they could always get ahead of these sort of votes, and they obviously tried to in November and then did in December. But I think, if your interim manager's getting Manager of the Month in her first month in charge, then sort of fair enough, that can happen. You can have the caretaker manager balance, you can have a nice run of fixtures. I think for her to have taken over in October and in December still winning most games, still unbeaten, but then capping it off against Bayern Munich, I think maybe the surprising thing is Arsenal didn't appoint her straight after Bayern, but maybe how it's panned out, the fact that they have made the right choice, as we say, it's probably we can forgive that now. But it does feel a little drawn out, doesn't it? But luckily, obviously Arsenal haven't lost Rennie to a job anywhere else. In our view, they've made the right decision, but it has taken a while. But I guess she was not going to be appointed when no one really thought when she came in she was going to be appointed. There were a lot of names being thrown about, none of which we were too convinced with. The worry was, are there any top candidates out there? Renee Slegers has said yes there are.
Yeah, that's the most incredible thing, I think, because obviously there's been a lot of appointments sort of in the past week elsewhere. I think that's kind of made our heads go, okay, it's getting a little bit more, swaying towards Renee. Obviously, Carla Ward taking the Ireland job and Casey Stoney going to Canada. So I think obviously the other candidates that you might presume might have been interviewed have kind of gone elsewhere. But I think if you're looking at at the market at the moment, it's actually a blessing that we've had somebody like her sort of coming through and yeah, I don't if we look elsewhere now, I don't think there's many other options in terms of what Arsenal are looking for. I think when you're appointing a manager to a club like Arsenal, obviously first and foremost you're thinking about the football, but with a club like, Arsenal women and the community that we've built and how we've backed Renee, it's kind of difficult to not have a manager who understands that, who has that connection with the fans, and also, going against the fans' connection that we've built with Renee and kind of picking someone else would obviously have huge impacts. The players and Renee herself has talked about the positive impact it has when the fans are on your side and they get behind the team. Also the team as well, like bringing somebody else in at this point would have been quite difficult. We've got a really sort of tough few games coming up. But yeah, definitely long-winded. I wonder if that's just kind of the process that the club has to take in trying to appoint somebody. But I think it had to be kind of Renee top there really that they were considering, and I can't really see anybody that could have overtaken that.
And also how well she's done. I've read articles in the last couple of months from well-respected women's football journalists who know far more than I do in some instances, and saying in their assumption they actually didn't think Renee wanted the job because
Yeah.
she was so good in those press conferences at really staying poker face, not giving anything away. So she'd even sold some of the top women's football writers down the river of actually I don't want the job, and that's how well she's done, sort of from that public view in terms of Arsenal and her relationship with the press. But Claire Wheatley's saying we're delighted to appoint Renee as our permanent head coach. Renee has excelled during her time as interim head coach, bringing our team, club, and supporters together and leading us to a hugely impressive run of results and performances. Here's the interesting bit. We have undertaken a thorough recruitment process aimed at identifying the best candidate to lead our women's first team at this exciting time. Rennie was the standout candidate through the process, and we're thrilled to be continuing our journey with her as our permanent head coach. And I really like this as well. Renee understands the values and ambitions of our club with experience of representing Arsenal both as a young player and now in a coaching capacity. We have every confidence that she is the best person to take us forward as we compete for trophies this season and beyond. And there is that real sense of Renee as, when she first came in as assistant manager in the summer of 2023, and then when she was, interim head coach and talking about her time as a 17-year-old in Arsenal's academy, even though it was such a tiny period in her career, but she was learning from Alex Scott. Kelly Smith was coaching some of the academy players. You feel that actually that year she had a real impact, at Arsenal's academy all those years ago.
Yeah, she definitely obviously had that, and I think she's made that clear in all the like you say, in all the press conferences, in all the discussions. I've been seeing all week pictures of her playing with Stina Blackstenius and like
Yeah.
you say, Alex Scott. I think that's so amazing, and obviously we've talked about the fact that she's still quite young in previous episodes when we were discussing her interim role, but I think from the get-go, one of the first things I remember seeing in one of her first press conferences was how big of a club Arsenal is, how much she understands that. It's clearly drilled into her. I part of that obviously from the time that she spent here when she was playing, but also I think coming into that role, coaching, working with the players, understanding them. I know in her assistant coaching role, she had a huge like one of her huge responsibilities was working with individual players. So obviously she's understood that from an individual perspective. I think when you're talking about experience, maybe people will say she's a little bit young, she's not had too much, I guess, but she kind of has. But I think also the roles that she's had a vast variety of them. So she understands a lot about the team as a whole, the game as a whole, especially at Arsenal as well. So she's actually done a lot of different things, and I kind of think that's played into why she's been so successful in the interim role and hopefully going forward as well. Is she's worked with individual players, she's worked with youth teams, she understands it from an academy perspective. Obviously, that's a huge part of what we're doing at Arsenal at the moment. We've signed quite a few academy players to professional contracts. So that's obviously a huge part of the club sort of ethos and bringing young players in and how much she could develop them as well. So there's so much more to it, and I think she's kind of right now ticking all the boxes in the best way possible.
I'll have an article out more in depth in terms of her playing a managerial career later this morning. And by the time you're watching this, it might already be up. So have a look over on the Guna Fanzine website. But to talk you through the end of her career, I mean, it's a difficult journey. She sustained a knee injury against England in November 2016. So it was a friendly Netherlands final game, so her final game of the calendar year. Jodie Taylor, who's now one of her sort of assistant coaches and has that sort of that role at Arsenal. She scored the winning goal after Slegers was taken off in the 9th minute. So there's a mad sort of link there, and that ended up being her final game of her career. So that was in November 2016. She was close to returning. She actually spoke to clubs in Sweden and the Netherlands, and she was nearly sort of back to playing football, but then thought, you know what, I'm going to try and have a week off and admit that I'm not going to play. And by the end of the week, she had made up her mind. So in February 2018, she announced her retirement, went straight back to Sweden in terms of doing some more coaching, getting her coaching badges done, and then straight away going into an under 19 role with IF Linham Bunkeflo. I hope I said that right. And promoted to their head coach role a few months later. March 2021, head coach for Sweden's under 23s. A few months later, Rosengard B. And then when Jonas Eidevall left Rosengard, she then took up the first team role. I think she was their under 19 manager potentially as well, if not just the B team. I stand corrected on that. And then led them to successive league titles. So every job she's had, she's worked her way up. She's done it the hard way. She's got to know the club and the people in the club. She's got, respect from the players and all of those roles and worked her way up rather than being parachuted into the top job, because that would have never happened. Realistically, she'd have never got this Arsenal job coming in from another club unless, as you say, she was far more experienced. And those Rosengard titles, I think people forget about quite easily because obviously that's the club we got Jonas Eidevall from, and in his last season there, he finished second in the league. So
Yeah.
all of the signs are sort of pointing to that. Maybe there's some symmetry in the fact that Slegers has taken over from Eidevall again. Maybe there are some similarities between, the two clubs. She obviously left Rosengard in a far better place than Eidevall left Arsenal. But as we say, there is, that's 6 years of managerial experience, mostly in senior football. And I think you're right. I think Arsenal fans can perhaps forget about that because it's not been at the top level in terms of a club with Arsenal. And can she stand up to the fan scrutiny, the media scrutiny? Well, she has so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the best way to prove sort of us or the fans in general, those who believe that is the results, right? We've talked about her as a person, we've always, seemed to like her as a person since she came in. She's done it extremely well in the press conferences. And then the last place really to get it right is on the pitch. And then you've seen, we've talked about this endlessly, the results, not only the wins, but the individual improvements. We standing out Russo, who's been absolutely fantastic after we complained for months that we wasn't getting the most out of these individual players, and she seems to have gelled the team together in a way that maybe Jonas couldn't do towards the end of his time at Arsenal. So definitely coming in, she's proven everybody wrong in every single way, and I obviously think that it is going to be different now. Obviously, that you can continue, you can build, you can start to think about who she might want to bring in transfer wise and things like that. It changes when you're not the interim coach. You've got different responsibilities and tactics can come into play a lot more. But she's kind of started to show that already, and I think obviously she's not going to come in hopefully on Sunday and change everything up completely. She's only going to continue from where we were, and hopefully it's hugely going to be beneficial to the players as well to get that confidence now. They know it's going to be Renee for the foreseeable future, and they can start to actually get comfortable in building something and see kind of where it goes. I think the tough start to the season obviously has impacted Arsenal now. It's kind of difficult to, in a league like the WSL, it's difficult to pick up so many points that you dropped so early on. So she has even had a difficult task in doing that. She's got to kind of prioritize what she wants to win and how far she wants to go in each competition and where her priorities lie. But she had a difficult circumstance to come into, not just with morale and individual players not performing, but also position in the league and things like that. So you're up against a very, very tough opposition in the league. You've got some tough games coming up as well that are going to be so important. But it has dragged out a little bit, but I think now we're going on to sort of a new era and it's going to be hugely important what happens next.
I'm at London Colney today for our first training session, I guess, as permanent manager, and I'm really interested to see what the feel is like there. If the players, I guess that'll feel like a bit of a relief for the
Yeah.
player because I think we know a lot of them always said quite publicly we want her to stay on in some capacity. I'm sure for a lot of them, if not all of them, that capacity would have been as the first team manager, as as the head coach. But for Sunday, you're there in the stands at Meadow Park. I'll be there in the press box. How different do you think that will feel, knowing that Renee Slegers, you're looking back to that Liverpool away game where the fans were singing her name and really trying to make sure they could tie her down if they're like, tell Arsenal, as
Yeah.
the fans they wanted Renee Slegers. Do you think Sunday is going to be quite a wonderful atmosphere in terms of really getting behind her once again, but also maybe encouraging her to step into the limelight a little bit and saying, this is your work now. You deserve this role, and she must be giving herself a bit of a pat on the back this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as fans, especially with the Arsenal fans and the Arsenal community, we've always kind of backed so many different players in different scenarios. We've been behind players when they're getting new contracts. I remember last season with the whole Stina and Viv situation, and we really do kind of go all out when there's somebody we need to back. And I think Renee was no different. The chants were incredible. The atmosphere in general was incredible because of the positive results, the team were performing, everybody was happier. So I don't think it's going to be any different, if not more on Sunday. We talked about Meadow Park a lot recently. The atmosphere there is amazing, and I think it's perfect that the first game is there rather than away or at the Emirates. But I think that's kind of perfect for her to come into. I don't think she will kind of take the limelight at all. Even I don't think that changes. I think the person that she's portrayed herself as in the press conferences and even at Liverpool, I was there in the away end. She came over, she clapped, but you could still tell, she was being
Yeah.
humble, she was quiet. They spoke to her, didn't they, after the game as well, and she was obviously so appreciative, but still not kind of putting any onus on herself, maybe just kind of the team as a whole. So it's different. I don't think that'll be any different. I think she'll always say, excuse me, we're focusing on the results, we're focusing on the team. But I think the fans will go absolutely crazy on Sunday for her, and just kind of the fact that it's over now, we can take a breath and kind of don't have to worry about her not getting the job, which obviously is a huge kind of concern, I think, for a while.
Yeah, I can't imagine she turns up for the presser today, like in a suit and tie, pulling out of a helicopter, landing at London. I don't
Yeah.
think, I don't think, like you say, she's going to completely change her character. And obviously, I think that feeling of being so close to the players, but also she's talked about sort of stepping out of the dressing room when needed, giving the players that space. I think you see the difference. I think, we talk a lot in the women's game about the benefits of women's coaches, and players do talk that up. And, that obviously isn't a direct criticism of Jonas Eidevall, but obviously things have changed. And Renee, as an ex-player in women's football, particularly, I think you really, really see that come across in her coaching, whether it's the fact that she's happy to let the team warm up, where, whilst just doing a few keepy ups, kicking the ball around with her coaches. I always think that's a sign of a relaxed manager who's happy to let her team go off, take the time to do the warm ups. She doesn't have to be there talking them through every kick of the warm up. She's got enough coaching staff so she can sort of settle down, whereas Jonas would sort of be quite pensive on the halfway line watching the other team warm up a lot of the time. She cuts a very relaxed figure, but I think you really get the sense that she gets footballers. She gets what they want in the dressing room. She gets what they want on the training ground, and also publicly in the media, talking about, what, we have got a world-class squad of players, so we can put a bit of pressure back on them. And they know, there were parts of in the last few weeks under Jonas Eidevall, there were individual errors as well. We couldn't leave everything at the door of the manager. And straight away, she was quite clear on going, I'm going to lead them forward, but also the players, particularly the senior players and our leadership players, they are going to have to take a bit of responsibility. But when you're playing for the manager and you respect and like the manager, that can become a lot easier. And I think she garnered that respect very, very quickly from the players in terms of it was an emotional time for them after Jonas Eidevall left. Emily Fox said that. Renee Slegers was obviously his colleague in a couple of different jobs now. It wasn't easy for them. So I think almost her first weeks would have been the most challenging, and it would have got easier and easier as it went on. But the fact that she took Arsenal from where we were at the end of that toxicity, really, at the end of Jonas Eidevall era, it feels so different now. But how impressed have you been by that side of things as well in terms of her relationship with the players?
Yeah, definitely. I know we talked about this. We touched on, her working with them previously, even when she was under Jonas, and she obviously always backed the project with Jonas, and she still talks about that now in such a positive way. But I think she was a lot, obviously, because Jonas takes up, he even spoke about this recently, takes up a lot of different roles, has a lot of responsibility. So I imagine most of kind of player relationships and individual player progress fell on Renee under that when she was in that role. So I think she spent a lot of time with a lot of these players. She's probably still doing that now where she can. Obviously, it's been tough in the past, 10, 11 games because she's had a lot of pressure on her, but I still think that'll be a huge part of her coaching style. I think the relatability as well, like you say, she's been in that position, she's played recently. In fact, she probably still could put some boots on and go out there on Sunday and kick about for us. But I think, that probably helps the players because you coming into it with a different mindset, you understand the game. Yes, the game's changed, but you understand the basis of how women's football operates and how it feels to be a player, so you can bring that into your coaching. I think we've seen that, obviously. I think it's fantastic. We've got two sort of female coaches in two top teams in the WSL at the moment, both played. Hopefully, we get an opportunity to have a title race because I think that is huge for women's football in general. Look at the two of them and how much they've achieved, and obviously we're talking so much, like you say at the minute, about getting more female coaches involved and how inaccessible it is, and we're getting stories like Renee Slegers coming through the ranks, coaching youth sides and then coming in as assistant roles, and then obviously being trusted to manage a team like Arsenal. I think that's it. Actually, we've not talked about that side of things, how huge that is for women's football and the growth of the game. We've talked about how difficult it is to be able to get those pro licenses and clubs not backing, female coaches enough and funding that. So could this be a huge step in general for women's football, even if she doesn't succeed, or, hopefully she does, but even if it doesn't all work out perfectly, what she's done and what she hopefully will continue to do will always be monumental, I think, in terms of the history of women's football and also Arsenal as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Arsenal women's first female head coach in over 10 years, I think.
Yeah.
So it is a big step forward. And as you say, 35 years of age as well. I think young managers coming in and doing it, and especially, there's players in this Arsenal team and elsewhere in the WSL who are the same age as her.
Yeah.
That can be hard as a manager. When your playing career is ended earlier. I've seen Jack Wilshere coaching Arsenal's youth teams before he went to Norwich, and I watched him in the warm-ups a lot of the time, and you could tell he was just itching to be one of the players again. And I think that
Yeah.
can be really hard, and that's obviously why she's gone straight into coaching. But when she is out there doing keepy ups, there must be part of her that, yeah, as you say, misses, being one of the players as well. And I've seen that with my local club who I commentate for. It's tough when you can also have that maybe assistant coach role or player role when you're a bit closer to the players, but then also you have to take that step away and be have that slightly different figure when you can't maybe quite be as close to them. Not suggesting that's changed massively, but it does have an impact. And she's obviously barely had the time to think during a lot of this job, but I think it's probably been quite clear for a while in her head, I'd imagine, that she did want it. And then she was reportedly interviewed, obviously, and maybe she just laid out her CV in terms of the 3 month unbeaten run and said, sort of, what more evidence do you want me to put in front of you? I guess just finally, Daisy, I guess we can settle down now in terms of and discuss the transfer window, but also our predictions for the end of the season. We've obviously seen so far in the transfer window 3 academy players sign senior contracts, which we will touch on in greater detail another time because I think it's really, really impressive. Vivlia, Layla Harbert, and Maddie Earl, 3 very, very talented players. I don't think she'd have had loads of a say in those 3 coming through. Obviously, as a former academy player, she will be you'd imagine promoting this, and it's great to see Arsenal pushing so many players through the academy because it's not an easy route to take a lot of the time. She'll know that herself. She never made a senior appearance for Arsenal. She left Arsenal's academy, went back to the Netherlands. So that's been really good to see. But you'd imagine now she'll take some more, she'll be able to take more ownerships over transfers and decide what she wants.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, like, this is just proving that women's football never ever ends. There's always something because as soon as we get happy about Renee signing a contract and signing the academy players up to professional contracts, we're thinking next about, okay, what do Arsenal need to progress as a squad and what do they need to take it to that next level? Other teams obviously are making moves already in the transfer window. Even the likes of teams sort of below Arsenal, like that's Liverpool, I think have had a decent start to the transfer window. So you can't just sit around and wait with these kind of things. And I think that's obviously got to be on her mind now, settling into this role. We've got a good squad. I think we've recruitment wise has been quite good in recent seasons. We've obviously brought the likes of Fox, Russo, Cooney Cross in, in recent seasons in general, and we've signed players to new contracts as well. Obviously, I think she's got some tough contract negotiations up in that might come up in the summer for certain players, who obviously are.
For players, though, to know if they respect Renee and enjoy playing under her, there might have been parts of them that were saying to the club, well, I'm not going to sign anything until I know who the head coach is. So there's also a part of me that's thinking, the fact it is Renee, why couldn't she have been put in position on the 1st of January and have the whole of the January transfer window? Obviously, contracts can be done in other periods, but that's a little strange in the fact that we're now over halfway through the January transfer window. Obviously, there hasn't been any signings brought in. And I don't think we're crying out for players as we have been maybe in previous seasons, but I think there's definitely a need for some recruitment. And the fact that we spent probably 17 days, obviously more focused on the manager when our first team manager resigned in October, maybe a bit interesting for me. But I think for those players who respect Renee, that could be a big boost in terms of getting some of these contracts signed.
Yeah, definitely. And I wonder, like you say, 17 days in, if that's kind of a sign of where Arsenal are at in this transfer window, if it's not a priority for them to think too much outside of the squad that they've already got. We, like you say, in terms of recent seasons, I don't think this could be a stronger squad. Usually, I go into it thinking, okay, it'd be nice to get, another. Obviously, it would be nice to get a winger. It would be nice to get a midfielder. It would be nice to look at the likes of these world-class players who other teams are interested in. But it's not. We're not screaming for it, like you say. We're not desperate for the players to come in. We don't need that reinforcement. We've got players coming back into the squad, and we're at a really good position in terms of the squad depth that we've got. I think obviously our biggest concern is probably contract negotiations negotiations, big players out of contract with the club, and I definitely think that Renee can influence that in terms of let's build something this season and then explore that as we go towards the summer, and hopefully some of the not all these players leave, because then that would leave Arsenal in a bit of a sticky situation going into next season. But like I say, there's still quite a while to go. Obviously, January is always interesting. Sometimes you get big transfers and sometimes you don't. But yeah, I think the focus has always been on let's get the contract sorted with Renee and kind of go from there.
Right then, halfway through the season, obviously still got that FA Cup game to play against Bristol City after that was moved, and then obviously kicking off their Cup campaign next week as well. Looking at the WSL table, starting with Brighton in fifth on 17 points, United fourth, 21, Arsenal third in 21 with a better goal difference by two, Manchester City second with 22 points, and then Chelsea top with 28 points. Obviously, Chelsea dropping their only points of the season away to Leicester in the final game of 2024. Does this reevaluate how you see the rest of the season? Obviously, at the moment, the priority for Arsenal is to be, sealing Champions League football again. Obviously, in March, they will resume their Champions League campaigns, as will Manchester City and Chelsea. There's a whole lot of football to be played, in the four different competitions for Chelsea, City, and Arsenal when you look at that title race. And if you are going to include Arsenal, which is optimistic, we know you are then going to have to include Manchester United, who are on, the same amounts of points as Arsenal and have obviously defended really well. How do you see it now, knowing Renee's in charge? Do you see it any differently, or are you still thinking, I think a title would be a little too optimistic at this point? Let's have a look at some of these cups, and then, again, if you get a favourable Champions League draw, then, you're 2 games away from the semi-finals.
Yeah, I think for me, the league is done. I think that's a very huge points gap. And if you even think about the like, playing Chelsea, playing Manchester City, even if you win those, you're still not on the same amount of points as Chelsea. So it has become kind of out of reach in that sense because I don't see them dropping points unnecessarily this season. The irony of saying that after they dropped points to Leicester, but I think that was obviously kind of a fluke in what they're doing. They're still unbeaten, which is crazy. They very much are set on that, and I do think they will get that. I do think second is absolutely up for grabs. I think you can definitely go toe to toe with the likes of Manchester City and Manchester United right now. I think that will be Arsenal's priority. Like you say, I do think we've got every ability to finish in second, if not in third, and get that Champions League qualification. For me, the Champions League, is always doable. It's tough. Looking at the teams that are left in those quarterfinals, it's probably one of the toughest I've ever seen. Those 8 teams are all probably the top 8 teams in women's football right now. But I do think, we went to the semi-final in a season that we had 4 key
Yeah.
injuries, and if you can, like you say, you get a good draw, you can do it. So it's never say never with that because it's knockout football. It's not pick up points and you're not chasing somebody else. You're just playing the game that's in front of you. And I think we've been quite good at that under Renee as well. And for me, I've always said Wembley could be huge. An FA Cup final. I'm never going to turn down a trip to is it Derby? Is it Derby that the summer?
Derby, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to say you're local, so I think obviously you
I'm very, very invested in that. Yeah,
yeah.
very invested in that now, and I'll be at Brighton next Wednesday for that as well. And that's another cup competition where also, City or United in the semi-final, and then you're in the final. You obviously got to beat Brighton first. The FA Cup can, go on a bit longer, but again, probably another decent draw in terms of London City Lionesses, who may well be a little more concerned in terms of getting promoted from the Championship. So. It's the same with the men's team as well. We're obviously a little bit closer than the women are in terms of being behind Liverpool in that title race, but there is always that's the beauty of cup football, I think, is you
Yeah.
can, even though it's tough, you can get to the finish line a little bit quicker, but you just have to work a little bit harder for it, sort of in terms of the opposition and the standard of the opposition you play, and also having to wait years and years for the draws because
Yeah.
somehow we've known who's going to be there since mid-December, and we have to wait till the 7th of February and for the draw, and then mid-March for the games. But that's another story. Daisy, anything else you want to touch on in terms of Renee Slegers? Have you come up with any new chants yet? Because I don't think I want to be hearing Wham or any of those Christmas songs come mid-January. So what have you got for us?
Well, you put me on the spot. I can't stand there and say that I make these chants up. I just copy everybody else, guys. But I think that we've got Super Renee Slegers one did quite well at Liverpool. I think that will continue. And clearly, I need to spend the next 24 hours instead of doing something productive. I need to think of a new chant for Renee Slegers. But no, I think
Renaissance. continues.
Yeah, exactly. We called that. Did you actually copyright the Renaissance, or did
Well,
you take it from somebody else?
I never saw anyone use it,
Yeah,
but I did have a look around on Twitter because I sort of said, Was it me?" And someone like 4 days before I put it in this preview had used it. So I thought it was sort of clean and scot-free, but someone else came up with it first. But I think, a massive banner on the outside of the Emirates Stadium come the end of the season, but
yeah,
potentially, yeah, you never know. But I'm sure they will get some chance going. But yeah, the certainly you felt towards the end of last year that the fans making their opinion very, very heard, that played a massive role just finally because a few of them were won over quite quickly. A few of them took a bit longer, myself included, and the most skeptical, I think, were persuaded after the buy-in game. That was the decisive moment for most people.
yeah, definitely. And obviously, you can't downplay that. I think that game atmosphere-wise as well was incredible. I think that was sort of the peak of where we were at this season in terms of performing on the pitch and also, getting behind the team and Renee. So I'm really excited for those big games. I think when you prove yourself in a big game as well, like Renee did, we can now go toe to toe with the likes of Chelsea, Manchester City, and not feel so sort of nervous that we used to. And going to it with like the confidence of winning, not just drawing, because obviously we went into that game against Manchester City and we at the start of the season and we drew 2-2. So it's, not just wanting to kind of say, okay, we've got a draw, great. It's about getting those victories. And I think that Renee has that, completely.
Well, myself and Leith are heading over to London Colney in a minute, or the Sober Realty Training Centre, as we should say. We'll be hearing from Renee Slegers at 2:30 p.m. this afternoon for her first press conference as Arsenal's permanent head coach. Daisy, I'll see you on Sunday at Meadow Park. I've got to shoot now, but thanks for your time.
No worries. Thank you so much. Looking forward to it.